video, I'm going to be going over some of the basics of the third grade data standards that we use, and we'll be doing bar graphs today. Your third graders' homework looks like this, and we've already had a conversation about they will be ignoring the top part of pictographs for today, and they will only be working on the bottom two bar graphs. They will be using some data that they wrote on the back here about someone's CDs. So if they didn't write that down, they'll need to use the data on here to make their bar graphs. And then they will also be writing 3 statements on the back based on their data and their bar graphs. Now, I will be using some different data to do mine here. So let me clip this up. And we can get started. Here is my data. So I'm doing mine on activities in the snow. Your third grader's graph will be on CDs. So here's my data in snow activities. 9 people were sledding, 14 people were building a snowman, and 11 people were doing a snowball fight. So now I'm going to make a horizontal graph, and I'm going to make a vertical graph. Again, bar graphs. So the data is represented in bars. I'm going to put this sticky note up here because these are some important things to always have on our bar graphs. We need labels, a scale, and an interval, or choosing an interval. So we'll get to each part of that. So my labels here, if I'm making a horizontal graph, that means that my bars need to go horizontally. If I'm making a vertical graph, my bars need to go vertically. So my horizontal graph here, I'm going to be having the snow activities here. So there will be snow activities here, and then my bars going this way, they will grow or be longer or shorter based on the number of people. So down here it would be number of people. So my bar graph is going to show the number of people doing a snow activity. Now I need to show what activities people were doing. So I have sledding, snowman, and snowball fight. So I'm going to make sledding, snowman, and snowball fight. So I've set up my graph now. I have all the parts that I need. So those parts are important because someone can then use our graph to get some information. If we didn't have these parts, they would see the bars and they would see the numbers, but they wouldn't know what they're representing. So it's important to know that this graph is going to be representing the number of people that were sledding, building a snowman, or doing a snowball fight. So we have our labels. Now I need to decide my scale. So the scale is the range of numbers from the least to the greatest. So right now, my numbers.
Mrs. Scepter, can you please call the front office?
My numbers are going, in third grade, we're always going to really have a range probably of 0 to something. So right now, my range is 0 to 14 because that's my largest number there. So my range needs to be 0 to 14. Now, this is where you kind of have to do scale and interval at the same time because if I do 0 here and 14 here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's not going to work. If I do 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 14 needs to end there. So you kind of have to do scale and interval at the same time. Interval is how you are kind of breaking apart your scale. So here I could do 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 and have an interval of 2 for a scale of 0 to 14. I've also talked to the third graders about sometimes a scale is, sometimes they use more friendly numbers, those convenient numbers. So they might do 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. 20 is kind of a friendly number there. So either way will work. I could do 0 to 14 and just use most of my graph, or I could do 0 to 20 and my interval would be 2. Here my interval has to be 2. Because if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't have any more graph. Now, I will say that it is okay if you need to extend a graph a little bit, but if you're having to make lots of different more markings for your scale, then that's really not the best interval to use, and that's how you'll know if the interval you're using is a good idea. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to use an interval of 2 and a scale of 0 to 14. So let me get that ready. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So again, my scale is 0 to 14 because that's the range of my numbers. And then my interval is 2 because I am counting by 2. I have broken apart my scale by 2s. So now I can go ahead and make my bars. So sledding, 9 people. Well, I can't go to just 8 because that's not accurate. I can't go to just 10. 9 is right in between. So my bar needs to be right in between 8 and 10, which is 9. Snowman, 14 people. So I can take it all the way up to the top of my scale. And snowball fighting, 11 people. I don't have 11 on my scale, but I know 11 is right there in between 10 and 12. So there is my horizontal bar graph for this information about snow activities. Now I'm going to put the same information in a vertical bar graph. So let me get my labels ready. So here, this time my bars will be going vertically, which means my numbers need to be over here. So the number of people needs to be over here. So let me put that. So there's my number of people label. And then down here will be the options of what they were doing, the snow activity. Put that. All right, so here are my labels for just what my graph is showing in general. Now, they weren't doing snow angels. They weren't, eating snow or anything like that. So I need to put the activities that the kids were actually doing on the graph here. So I'm going to put those down here. There was sledding and building a snowman and snowball fighting. So I have all my labels here. Now again, I kind of do scale and interval together. If I want to do a scale with all of my numbers and if I need to add a little bit, that's okay. But if I'm adding lots of rows, then maybe my interval isn't the best idea. And so here we go. My range is 0 to 14 again. Sometimes I could do maybe 0 to 15 or 0 to 20, just depends on the size of my graph. So if I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, well, an interval of 1 won't even work here. I'd have to add lots to my graph to do an interval of 1. So let me try an interval of 2. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. If I do a scale of 0 to 14 with an interval of 2, it fits perfectly on my graph. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. All right, so I have my scale and interval ready. And sometimes it just takes kind of putting it together and seeing if it works. So now let me do my sledding. So here, 9 people were sledding. Again, I don't have 9 exactly on my scale here, but I can put it right here. So I'm just going to put kind of a little dot there to show me where my bar needs to go. Building a snowman, my data was 14. Well, that goes all the way to the top of my graph. So I'm going to do that there. And then snowball fighting was 11 people. So I'm just going to put, just so I know where it needs to go, a little dot right there so that I can be accurate on my bar graph. All right, so now that I've made my bar graph, your third grader has been directed to write some statements on the back about their graph. So let me show you what my statements are. But again, your third grader statements will be about the CD data. So here are the statements that I wrote about my data. Your third grader has to write 3. I've written a few more. But anyways, the statements really need to be using some numbers and they need to be comparing parts of the graph. So here were my statements. 5 more people were building a snowman than sledding. 2 fewer people were sledding than doing a snowball fight. 34 people were playing in the snow. 20 people were sledding and fighting. Now, I'll want you to notice that for this one here, I was comparing snowman and sledding. I was just straight comparing them and seeing which one was more or fewer. Same thing here with sledding and snowball fighting, just comparing them and making a statement about how many more or fewer. This one was a little bit different. 34 people playing in the snow. I got that by thinking people were sledding and building a snowman and snowball fighting, so I need to add all of them together to tell the total of how many people were playing in the snow. And then 20 people sledding and fighting with the snow. That means I need to add together the sledders and the snowball fighters. So 9 plus 11 is 20. So these are my statements for my data. Your third grader will use this data to do the vertical and horizontal bar graph and write 3 statements.